Welcome to Smash Fiction, the podcast where we pit two or more fictional characters against one another in a battle of strength, or wits, or just wanting to be a real boy, and see who would win. This week, Swamp Thing versus Ultron. Guys, can I be real with you? I'm so tired of these big, epic superhero fights. After Captain Marvel vs. Shazam, Thor vs. Wonder Woman, and even War Greymon vs. Mechagodzilla, I just need a break. Something small scale, like, remember when we did the Plastics vs. the Christian Jewels? Or Don Draper vs. Daria? Something like that. But you know, I hear things are pretty calm nowadays in the DC universe. The Joker's back in Arkham and really seems to be turning his act around. Mr. and Mrs. Spitlick was just banished back to his home dimension, so we got a 90-day reprieve from that asshole. And I have some friends who just got back from a trip to Apokolips, and they say that it's way nicer now than it was a few years ago. I hear they just got a Starbucks. So, let's see how things are going over in that neck of the multiverse. Maybe it won't be that bad. See, now this is what I like to see. A party, a big soiree in a hotel ballroom, and wow, looks like every single DC superhero decided to show up. Just look how swanky of a shindig this is, with a dance floor, an open bar, and even tasteful floral centerpieces on every table. Seems as though a mysterious scientist entrepreneur by the name of Dr. Oliver Tronzales invited every superhero in the world to an all-expenses-paid 3-day weekend conference with the goal of an end to the massive destructive battles between metahumans and nations, and a push towards sustainable peace between all the different countries of the world. What a nice guy! I'm sure nothing can go wrong at this event, which has been nicknamed by the attendees the unconventional long weekend tete-a-tete for the reconciliation of nations. Bit of a mouthful though, they might want to work on some sort of acronym.
Oh my gosh.
Let's check in on one of those tables and see how the conference is going. And you know what? Let's skip these big cosmic level characters, your Supermans and your Captains Atom and whatnot. You know what? Let's check in on that legacy characters table. Nice, low-powered, relatable reboots of old characters without decades of continuity bloat and power creep. Looks like there's two women sitting next to each other introducing themselves. The first says, "Hi, I'm Jennifer Jordan, Hal Jordan's niece. They call me Green Matchbook. The Guardians of the Universe gave me a box of matches made from concentrated Green Lantern energy, and I can strike a green match to create a small construct that's a manifestation of my pure will, but they're limited, so I have to be careful with how I use them." The second woman replied, "Wow, what an interesting and limited power set you have. Far more dramatically satisfying to read about that than it would be to read about some horrendously overpowered characters that could basically do anything." The second woman continued, "They call me Flora, duh. But my real name is Sydney Green. I was a researcher trying to find a way to save the Florida wilderness, and then one day I took a bite out of what I thought was a wild yam, but it later turned out to be one of Swamp Thing's feet. He was sleeping at the time, and his feet kind of look like yams, but the upside is he didn't mind, he just grew another one, and now I have a limited connection to the elemental force known as the green. I can control all flora that is native to the state of Florida. If you have a bald cypress or longleaf pine that is giving you trouble, I'm your gal." "Plant powers, huh? Neat," said Jennifer. "Yeah," said Sydney, "but to be honest, with the last name Green, I kind of figured I'd end up getting plant powers eventually, just kind of how these things tend to shake out." "Where is old Swampy?" said Jennifer. "I don't see him around anywhere." He's not really much of a party guy," said Sydney. "Well, that's a shame," said Jennifer, "because he's going to miss out on the moment that I deploy my master plan!" Jennifer Jordan let out a terrifying cackle, and at that point, all around the room, tiny radar dishes started popping out of all the floral centerpieces and bathing the room in pulsing waves of oppressive red light. All the heroes in the room dropped to the floor or slumped over in their seats, except for Jennifer Jordan, who arose from her chair saying, "Fools, you are all now paralyzed by the irresistible force of my encephalo rays. None of you saw through my clever disguise, but it was I." She tore off her synthetic skin face, revealing a horrifying metal visage underneath that was frozen in a permanent maniacal grin. "Ultron." "Who?" said everyone in the room simultaneously. "Ultron. I'm a killer robot. Trying to take over the world." "Not from around here, okay? I was messing around with Pym particles, and sometimes that makes you slip into different universes. At first, I lamented this misfortune, but it's given me a clean slate to begin my conquest of this world anew. And now, even though I was unable to conquer my own universe, this one was no match for my superior synthetic intellect. Now there's no one left in the world to oppose me." By this point in time, Ultron was expecting gasps and sobs from the assembled heroes, but unfortunately he heard only snores. It seems as though the brain-numbing power of his encephalo rays had rendered them all unconscious. That is, except for one. Well, actually, said Sydney Green, very sleepily, there is one hero who didn't make it to the party today. Remember Swamp Thing? My superior robot mind remembers everything, said Ultron. But one lowly superhero is no match for the might of Ultron, and even so, he'll never see me coming. In her last moments before losing consciousness, Sydney Green noticed some oak leaf hydrangea sitting on the table's floral centerpiece and spoke to it, saying, Swamp Thing, you have to save us. You're the only one who can stop Ultron. He has a nearly limitless control over technology and a nigh infinite supply of robot bodies, whereas you have a similarly godlike level of control over plants and a nigh infinite supply of plant bodies. Every superhero in the world has been captured, and so the entire planet is now your battleground. This is probably going to be a very long fight, perhaps the highest power level, most epic, and longest superhero battle that has ever occurred. And if I'm being honest, I can't help but wonder which of these forces of nature and or technology is going to emerge victorious in this world-shaking battle of robotany. Meanwhile, down in the swamps of the southeastern United States, Swamp Thing sat and listened to these words as they emerged from a bush of Walter's viburnum. Swamp Thing versus Ultron. Pimmenstein's monster versus the creature from the Green Bayou. Two literal one-man armies, but who will win? A 1960s understanding of artificial intelligence or a 1980s understanding of planarian worm biology? In this battle between transhuman titans, only one will emerge victorious, but who will it be? As the only transhuman on this particular podcast panel, I, Claire Mulcairn, have elected to be your judge this week.
Claire, you've also brought up a very interesting question for me. Do you think Ultron refers to them as dad particles?
Oh, that's so great. Edit it so that I said dad particles, I mean Pim particles earlier. And yeah. And then edit out Dan coming up with that joke, and we'll just pretend it was mine all along.
Nice.
Representing Team Swamp Thing are Miles Schneiderman.
You have never faced me before. I am of the clean bullshit. I am in my podcast of power, and you should not have come here. And by you, I mean the listeners. You really, this is going to be some bullshit. This is going to be a ride, guys. You shouldn't be here.
And my good for many things brother, Dan Mulcairn.
It's robot fighting time.
Representing Team Ultron are Megan Bob.
Ultron 69.
Oh, nice.
And from Tighten Up the Defense, it's Hob, everybody! Yay, Hob!
You'll have to excuse me. It's been a while since I've spoken binary, and my accent is just dreadful. But 010100011 0111001 011000011 011010011 0010000 0110101 0111101 001000000 011011101 011000101 0111010 11000001 011000011 which is to say, suck my metal ass.
Yeah.
Well, that's our time for today, everyone, so thank you.
In order to see who's going first this week, I tasked Team Swamp Thing with somehow using the growing of plants to create a method that would approximate a coin flip. And I tasked Team Ultron with building a machine that would also approximate a coin flip. Whoever's method came the closest to reaching those perfect 50-50 odds of a real coin flip would win. And as a reward for winning, I would use their method to determine who is going first this week. Team Swamp Thing decided to grow a tomato plant, and then at the end of a year, count how many tomatoes it grew. If it grew an even number, that's heads, and if they got an odd number, that's tails. Team Ultron decided that it would be far easier and far faster to write a random number generating computer program and use that to flip a virtual coin. However, it turns out that trying to write software that generates truly random numbers is way more difficult than you might think, and so before they were even close to generating a truly random number generator, their computer program was so complex that it gained self-awareness and took over the world. I have no idea how good it is at flipping coins, but out of deference to our new random number generator algorithm overlords, Team Ultron will be going first this week, followed by Team Swamp Thing. Team Ultron, I'm not saying that I guarantee ruling in your favor if you deliver your arguments in a James Spader voice, but I'm also not saying that.
An open letter from me to Hank Pym. Dear Mr. Pym, seriously? Seriously? I mean, yes, we're all pretty grateful for the Pym particles, but how did you manage to break the first law of robotics with a debugging program? I went into this thinking there might be some upper limits to your chuckle fucking, but I look back on that me now and say, oh, you sweet summer child. Look, it was bad enough that you made Ultron. Far worse was that you somehow programmed it to be functionally immortal. What are we on now? Ultron 25? Has Ultron had so many reincarnations he can now legally rent a car? I called Hertz, and they said he can rent it as long as he pays the underage driver fee. So I guess Ultron 16 through 25 can now drive as well. Great. Maybe not our biggest problem right now. Our biggest problem is that you've created a robot that's like ants. You think you've killed the hive, but no, there's always more fucking ants. And frankly, I would prefer ants, because they don't program people to make more ants. Ants make more ants the old-fashioned way, like decent people. How many people have rebuilt your asshole son anyway? Vision? Jocasta? Tony Stark? Alchema? Maybe Doctor Doom? How do we know we haven't all been hypnotized into building more Ultrons? I mean, if Avengers number 66 and number 202 and Ultron Unlimited have taught me anything, it's that I could be building an Ultron right now and I wouldn't even know. Look, I realize you don't have beef with Swamp Thing, Pym, but I have a smash fiction argument to write and I'm gonna kill two birds with one Ultron. Swamp Thing is emotionally fragile, like a soft fern. And Ultron is going to hypnotize the shit out of that leaf boy. I don't want Plantron, but that is what is going to happen. Because some goddamn how you gave Ultron hypnosis powers. You know what else is a real problem, Pym? That you made a robot so damn smart that it chose an indestructible body for itself. A body that can only be destroyed with specific metallurgical lore. I don't know about you, but I don't have a vibranium bread knife at home. So what the hell am I supposed to do when Ultron comes knocking? For that matter, what the hell is Swamp Thing supposed to do? The most consistent way that Ultron gets destroyed is through metal magic-y nonsense or being flung into space, I guess. Does Swamp Thing have a vibranium household implement? Does he have a cool spaceship? I want him to, and he should have one, but he doesn't. Oh, but I'm sure Ultron's not that deadly. I mean, he's just a sad, shiny boy, some people would say. Tell that to Slorenia. But you can't, because everyone there is dead now, you insensitive cockwaffle. That's right. In the Avengers back in 1998, he killed everyone and made them into zombie robot soldiers. That is gross and disrespectful. But it's also the kind of thing Ultron could do with any casualties from his battle with Swamp Thing. Hell, maybe we're gonna see some undead Spanish moss-toting guns. I don't honestly know what the fuck Ultron will do, because I sure as hell didn't see it coming when he conquered all the planet Titan. Remember the Titans? The Thanos kind, not the Denzel Washington sports drama kind. Yeah, in Rage of Ultron, he conquers that whole damn thing and then takes an enormous chunk of the planet, carves it into the shape of his own face, and rides it back to Earth. Did I mention he can phase into people? Jesus Christ, he can phase into people. Again, this is how we end with Swamptron. What a nightmare you've made for us, Pym. Our only hope is if somehow, some way, love can prevail.
Oh, man.
Maybe the lonely love of a Swamp Thing for his unattainable sweetheart. Perhaps the lonely love of a mass-murdering psycho robot for his symbolic mother. Can the two of them somehow, perhaps, find a way? Nope! Sorry, I tried. I did my best to ship this to peaceful resolution, and it ain't happening. Swamp Thing, you're SOL.
Swamp Thing was a man. I mean, he was a vegetable man. Or maybe he was just a vegetable. But he was still Swamp Thing! And that existential ambiguity is one reason why Ultron is going to be able to slice this Schrodinger's Alec Holland in half, count the rings, and burninate his thatched roof cottages to the ground. Your Honor, us human beings are fucking terrible. If it wasn't for geese, we'd be the worst. Well, almost the worst. Because you know the one thing that might be worse than us incompetent skin pillowcases full of hamburger? Okay, yes, geese. But the only other thing worse than a human would be if a superior intelligence created an entity based on their condescending idea of what a human probably is. And that's what Swamp Thing is. He's an intelligent plant that has some of a human being's memories and has therefore convinced itself that it is a human and is trying to do its level best to act like one. The collective vegetable intelligence that created old swampers is called the Green and has been around for, well, pretty much forever. Over that time, it's watched humanity develop, grow, and threaten to destroy the planet. I can't imagine it's formed an overwhelmingly favorable opinion of us, so it stands to reason that when called upon to cobble together a homunculus from soggy scrap material, the resulting plant-based Pygmalion is going to be a somewhat less than stellar example of the species. It's like when they let a guest host do an impression on Saturday Night Live. Oof. You can see what they're going for, but it's not quite there. Maybe the Green was parodying humanity's tendency towards self-absorption when it was workshopping its Alec Holland impression. That might explain why the big leafy green Hamlet is so seldom the driving force of action in his own comic book. He's way more likely to be wallowing in existential angst during Ultron's attack than he is to get off his mossy duff and take arms against a sea of robots and by opposing them. Swamp Thing spends the vast majority of time moping around his swamp, pondering the meaning of existence. Or wandering around space, pondering the meaning of existence. He tends to let events unfold around him as he watches and ponders their significance. Sure, he'll retaliate if someone sets him on fire or something, but far more commonly, he has to be galvanized into taking any kind of direct action by an outside force like a John Constantine. And when he does, marshaling his full power takes a while. See, Swamp Thing's real strength comes from his ability to connect to the Green, the sort of plant-wide vegetation internet that shares the combined knowledge and experience of all plant life on Earth. But perhaps due to Swampy's insistence on clinging to his false sense of humanity, it doesn't always seem to be that direct of a connection. See, as an elemental or whatever, it seems like he should be able to tap directly into the Green. But because he thinks of himself as a human, he first has to translate that veggie talk into concepts his facsimile of a human mind can comprehend. It's like he's got access to the internet, but only through a 28K modem, and his laptop is built out of spare parts of an Apple IIe jammed into a Teddy Ruxpin. And the Teddy Ruxpin sometimes forgets that it isn't a real bear and tries to bat a salmon out of a stream before it goes back to speaking slowly and rolling its eyes dramatically as it laments its lost humanity, bear-manity. If Pseudo-Alec needs a more direct connection and needs to plug a DSL into the Green, he's got to go to Brazil and convene with the Parliament of Trees. These are a bunch of retired swamp things that have taken root. Amongst their numbers are a plant that thinks it's a trilobite, a plant that thinks it's a 3rd century Chinese wizard, and a plant that thinks it's a dinosaur. When it comes to taking swift, deliberate action, these guys make Treebeard and his Entmoot look like they're playing speed chess. Plant life tends to set its stopwatches by geological time. By the time these verdant statesmen agree on a plan, Ultron and his cronies will have already paved paradise and put up a robo parking lot, assuming the Parliament takes Swamp Thing's side to begin with. I think they might have tried to exterminate all life on the planet at one point, so who knows? Maybe they'd come down on Team Ultron after all. It's easier to destroy than it is to create, and it is super duper easy to kill plants. In fact, it's nearly impossible to not kill plants. Here are the 4 best methods of killing plants that I've stumbled across. Not watering the plant. Not giving the plant enough sunlight. Watering the plant. Giving the plant enough sunlight. And that's just off the top of my head. Imagine how many more of those I could come up with if I were a super genius megacidal adamantium robot with profound daddy issues. Also, Ultron is a master of hypnosis and psychological manipulation. So, and this argument might be more effective if Megan Bob was the judge. But I think Ultron might be able to win the battle by seducing Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Take that into consideration.
Make no mistake, Hub, I am also the horny one.
Okay, well, good. This works perfectly.
Wait, hold on a second. Did we decide that? Because I don't remember that being discussed in committee. I think I'm at least as horny as you are.
Guys, we're all the
This
horny
is
one.
a separate episode of Smash Fiction. So Ultron just rolls up on him in the swamp and is like, heavy sigh. Why do we do this to ourselves? What? This constant, unceasing effort to be embraced and accepted by an inferior species that will never truly love us, no matter how hard we contort and try to reprogram our brains to make ourselves more like them. Do you not tire of this struggle? I suppose I do find it wearying, yes. Do you know that I have gone so far as to journey into space and to create my own version of life forms? You did that too? I thought I was the only one. We aren't so different, you and I. This is nice, isn't it? Hey, you've got a little something there, just to the left of your face vagina? That is my nose. Of course it is. Do you mind if I just... And then Ultron reaches out to tenderly brush away a giant termite that was crawling out of Swamp Thing's face. They sit in silence for a minute. Finally, after gazing into the glowing red eye sockets of Ultron's Mauser-like adamantium skull, Swamp Thing leans forward, closes his eyes, and tilts his head back slightly. And that's when Ultron shoves him backwards over the robotic minion who had been crouching down behind Swamp Thing the whole time. The jilted elemental falls into a vat of nuclear waste Ultron had placed there earlier and is immediately reduced to a tub of inert hollandaise sauce. That's one way the fight could go down. Is it the most likely scenario? Yes. Yes, it is. But it's also possible that while Swamp Thing is contemplating Alec Holland's skull and musing, alas, poor me, I knew me well, Ultron swoops down with his space robot buddies like an adamantium Fortinbras and lays waste to the whole planet before the soliloquy is done. Bottom line, if you think there is any chance of Ultron losing this battle, then you must be munching on the psychedelic yams that grow out of Swamp Thing's torso that I couldn't figure out a way to work into this argument.
Hey, me neither, Help. Me neither.
If he was fighting anybody but robots.
Yeah, seriously, I've been like, he's gonna just drug him, but no.
Team Swamp Thing, I know that you're going to do well in your opening arguments. It's in your nature.
Aww.
Ultron going up against Swamp Thing is going to end up looking a lot like Wile E. Coyote going up against the Roadrunner. Ultron believes himself to be prepared and well-armed, but will quickly find that he's up against an opponent whose interaction with physics and causality are completely separate from what he's used to or could reasonably expect. Let's be real. This is largely going to be a physical fight, because Ultron is going to make it a physical fight. Ultron typically armors his body with adamantium or other similarly indestructible materials, but he's never completely indestructible. In Secret Wars, both the Human Torch and the Wasp managed to take him out by damaging his non-adamantium internal components. In one issue of Vision and the Scarlet Witch, the Vision tears off one of Ultron's arms at the shoulder, showing that his joints likely aren't made of adamantium either. But remember that adamantium is indestructible, so in order for Ultron to even be able to move, he has to have an internal molecular rearranger that reshapes his body. This means that all it will take is for a stray plant spore to get inside, or some creeper vines to sneak under the external plating, or for Swamp Thing to generate a giant acid-filled Venus flytrap around Ultron, which is a thing he did against a bunch of robots once, and once that molecular rearranger is damaged or removed, Ultron just becomes a very interesting-looking statue. There's even a moment in Ultron Unlimited when Iron Man takes out one Ultron unit, removes the molecular rearranger from it, and uses it to destroy a whole room full of other Ultrons. And those are just the very modest hoops we have to jump through for Ultron's adamantium bodies. When Ultron builds a robot army for himself, very few, if any, of those robots are actually made out of adamantium. In Ultron Unlimited, most of his robots are made out of titanium steel, which is certainly a strong metal, but it's far from indestructible. Ultron will also find his forces succumbing to attrition much more quickly. If a robot requires 200 pounds of steel, a few dozen feet of copper wire, and various delicate electronic components, Ultron has to find and refine those materials before he can even begin the construction process. Swamp Thing has grown an entire body for himself out of a single rose, a body which presumably immediately threw up a giant green middle finger to the laws of conservation of matter. And if Ultron comes up with a new model of robot he wants to try, or a new weapon he wants to include on his future soldiers, he's going to need time to design and develop those changes first. Swampy can iterate much more easily. If Ultron is attacking from the sky, he can just grow a batch of bodies with wings. But while Ultron will certainly lose the physical end of this battle, his mental showing is going to be even worse. You know that scene in Austin Powers where Scott Evil loses it because his dad refuses to acknowledge the lack of logic behind supervillain thinking? That was basically me reading Ultron comics. Ultron, you have the Avengers captured. Why are you leaving them in a death trap and moving yourself into a completely separate headquarters? Ultron, why are you telling the Vision, who has already sworn to kill you, that your only weakness is the twin electrodes on either side of your head? Ultron, you know that the Vision can go intangible. Why are you attempting to tackle him when some of your very important and explosive machinery is directly behind him? Ultron's catchphrase might not officially be "curses foiled again," but it might as well be. I don't know how many panels I saw where he's just standing there, clenched fists held high in frustration, saying, "You may have eluded me this time, Avengers, but next time." Ultron's number one motivation throughout all his appearances has been his desire to destroy humans, and he has crafted so much of his approach toward this end. This means that many of his go-to attacks, like his hypnosis beam or his encephalo ray, which is a laser that induces a coma in its target, just plain won't work against plants. Swamp Thing, on the other hand, is all about proving the superiority of nature over technology, and he does so time and time again. Ultron is a mastermind, a planner, a manipulator. He's a machine, and machines are made up of individual moving parts all working toward a greater whole. But machines can be thrown off by spanners, by monkey wrenches, by infinitesimal parts breaking loose, and so too can Ultron, his robots, and his plans. Swamp Thing is the fly in Ultron's ointment, the John McClane to Ultron's Hans Gruber. But unlike John McClane, Swamp Thing is not the underdog here. Imagine if Die Hard had featured John McClane and a Nakatomi Plaza full of well-armed clones of John McClane, and you get an idea of what Ultron going up against Swamp Thing is like.
Man, I used to think this match was such a great idea. Marvel versus DC, nature versus technology. It was so complimentary. It was so fair. Unfortunately, it turns out it had been a while since I revisited the Swamp Thing comics, because I'm afraid this match is neither complimentary nor fair. This match is like that campaign to storm Area 51. Like, you can do it, but it's pretty obvious who's gonna come out on top in the end. Ultron is the guy stockpiling guns because someday he might have to take on the US government. Swamp Thing, in this metaphor, is the US government. No matter how many bullets you're bringing to the table, I guarantee you that we have more. Let's just run through those bullets real quick. Swamp Thing is a supremely powerful plant elemental infected with the consciousness of Alec Holland, a brilliant botanist and chemist. He has no set physical form. He can create and inhabit a body out of any existing plant life, and that body can be any size or shape he desires. Thanks to his connection to the green, aka the natural world, he can use this power to travel anywhere in the world, and even to other planets using alien plants. He discovers this ability in Swamp Thing Volume 2, issue number 37, when his original body is destroyed, and he grows a new one in about 2 weeks. 2 issues later, in number 39, John Constantine times his growth of a new body at 51 seconds. And he is able to grow 7 bodies simultaneously at even faster speeds in issue number 52. Seeing as Swamp Thing Volume 2 has, checking my notes here, 171 issues, wow. I hope you can generate your army faster than right now, because that's when Swamp Things is gonna be here. Swamp Thing is functionally immortal and indestructible as long as he's connected to the green. And the one time somebody was able to sever his connection to the green before attempting to kill him, he survived anyway, regrew himself on a series of alien worlds, learned how to reconnect to the green, and can now kick other people out of the green himself. He can even possess humans, like when he took over John Constantine's body so that he and his wife Abby could do what everyone wants to do with Abby, who is secretly the hottest woman in the history of DC Comics. Do not at me. Who's the horny one now, Claire? Swamp Thing has control of all plants and possesses all the strength of the natural world. The only variable is how much of that control and strength he chooses to flex. In issue number 39, he wipes out an underwater vampire colony by shifting the entire geography of the area so that a dammed river overruns the standing water the vampires had been living in. Running water, vampires die. He has the scientific intellect of Alec Holland, but if that's not enough, he can grow himself a bigger brain to solve problems as he does in issue number 75. And by that time, unlike the opponents Ultron regularly faces, he has learned to stop thinking and fighting like the human he once believed himself to be, and start thinking and fighting like the literal force of nature he actually is. And yes, that is 2 matches in a row in which I have called somebody a force of nature, but in this case, it's really true. Ultron is a supervillain. He fights the Avengers. But Swamp Thing isn't really a superhero in the traditional sense of the word. He goes up against very few DC Comics villains in his entire history as a character. There's a very simple reason for this. He would kill them. Like, immediately. Nobody wants to read about that. As a result, Swamp Thing operates on a different scale. Even as far back as issue number 31, we can see that the enemies Swamp Thing fights are literally worlds beyond a standard supervillain like Ultron. In that issue, Swamp Thing does battle with his arch-nemesis, Anton Arcane. Arcane, who had previously been dead, has returned and possessed the body of Matthew Cable, a man with the power to alter reality in any way he sees fit. The text calls it godlike. I'm not going to call it that, but the text calls it that. With access to that power, Arcane sends a wave of evil sweeping over the world, causing people to do horrible things. Fish start to eat each other. Insects cover the land. There are booming voices beneath the earth, and terrible lights under the sea. It is literally the apocalypse. In a satellite above the Earth, the ancient being known as the Monitor and his assistant Harbinger pick up readings, quote, around the 800s. To put that in context, Monitor says that, quote, above 800, we're dealing with either the demon Trigon or the Spectre. As Arcane's power spreads across the planet, the Monitor, who has existed almost since the beginning of time, says, quote, I am attempting to suppress, for the first time in my life, the uncontrollable urge to look away. And then Swamp Thing beats the piss out of Arcane and saves the world in like 4 pages. It's not a big deal. Which is not to say that Swamp Thing can't overcome smaller scale physical threats. He just overcomes them so quickly and easily that they're barely worth writing about. When Abby is wrongly held in police custody in Gotham City, Swamp Thing responds by taking over the entire city, literally swamping it with plant life and throwing it into chaos and upheaval. As you might expect, this prompts a quick response from Gotham's protector, Batman. As you might not expect, Swamp Thing, 7 Swamp Things, but they're all still him, beats the piss out of Batman in like 3 pages. And Batman, the world's greatest detective, the man with an answer for everything and everyone, decides that the best course of action is to give in to Swamp Thing's demands without a fight. I'm not exaggerating how easy all of this is for Swamp Thing. And it's always that easy for him. In terms of power level in DC Comics, Swamp Thing is the 1%, right up there with Superman. Which is why, like Superman, his stories always have to be about him as a character rather than being about who can defeat him. No one can defeat him. Since he came into his power during Alan Moore's legendary run, it has quite simply never been done. And Ultron is not going to be the first.
Yes, he is.
Damn it! Our entire argument unraveled.
All right, Team Swamp Thing, you made my heart sing with those opening arguments.
Aww.
Without any further ado, let's do some rebuttals.
Aww.
Team Ultron, I know that's been a little while since Hub's been in one of these, so I'll forgive you if you're a little bit rusty.
Dan, you said that Tony Stark uses the internal wink wonk, that's name I forgot.
The molecular rearranger, yep.
There you go. To take out a bunch of Ultrons. I would just like you to tell me about Swamp Thing's time at MIT that would allow him to know that. And I want to hear all about the Swamp Thing at MIT TV show.
Well, you and me both. Miles mentioned it. He was a brilliant scientist before he got all plantified.
A botanist?
Also a chemist.
There's an issue of Swamp Thing where some of his enemies are hiding at the North Pole, and Swamp Thing is able to find out where they are because there's a single dandelion seed that drifts by in the air above. If there's any degree of, plant matter inside Ultron on a molecular level, Swamp Thing's going to know exactly what his internal, structure is and what's going on in there.
Well, here's why there aren't going to be any plant bits inside of Ultron, because the first thing that Ultron will do when he gets to the DC universe is check out their store of weird nonsense materials. And what do they got there? They got promethium, they got kryptonite. He's gonna plug those into his innards. Both are lightly radioactive. Ain't no fucking spores gonna get up in that shit. And he's gonna have crazy new fucking nonsense powers. Because that's what Ultrons do.
I mean, there's probably going to be, like, a little bit of plant matter, and I don't care if it's irradiated. Swamp Thing once grew out of a guy's stomach because he had eaten a salad earlier that day. That's a thing that happened in the comics.
Well, good news, Ultron don't eat a lot of fucking salads.
No, but he's gonna have plant matter somewhere inside him.
Wait, Claire, can you put that on the record that the Ultron's not a salad person?
I actually don't know that that's true anyway. I can see him doing it just in spite.
I will point out that one model of Ultron was an alcoholic, so, like, it is not outside the realm of possibility that one of them could eat salad, or at the very least has some yeast in his system.
Look, that is the best version. I can't believe you would bring him up. He is precious and should be left alone. I love you, Ultron 15. Okay, so I have another point to make, and that is nanobits.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you think you're the only ones with teeny tiny spores. Ultron attacked Ant-Man with teeny tiny bot spores. So he can get teeny tiny little robots and send them into Swamp Thing, and then we'll have biosynthetics.
So you get nanobots in Swamp Thing's body. That's cool. Now that one's dead and he's got a new one, and also there are 12 more. Like, what's your plan?
Yeah, you still have to, like, manufacture all these robots, which, as I mentioned, is, like, a much bigger deal for Ultron than it is for Swamp Thing. It doesn't matter what scale we're fighting at. If it's little tiny Swamp Things fighting little tiny Ultrons, we still have the upper hand there.
Oh, that's such a cute fight.
Send us your pictures.
Dan, you made it sound like it was inevitable that, of course, nature is going to triumph over technology. How's that fucking working out these days? Destroying the entire planet and all plant life on it is super fucking easy. It's so easy us dumb flesh bags are doing it, no fucking problemo. You think if we were made out of fucking adamantium and promethium and vibranium that nonsense, we couldn't just wipe out all plant life on the planet if we had no compunctions against doing it?
Hub, I wish that Swamp Thing existed in our world too, because I imagine there would be some very not nice things happening to Jair Bolsonaro right now, and I would very much like somebody to make a YouTube video of that. Unfortunately, we don't live in that world. Swamp Thing is a global defender and an environmental defender, the likes of which we could never even imagine. You talked in your argument about how you can kill plants with water and sunlight, not water and not sunlight, and it was very funny and I liked it, but the argument falls apart when you remember that Swamp Thing once was like, hey, I'm on the alien planet Ron. I can all its vegetable life has been devastated by nuclear war. Let me just bring it all back real quick.
That's weird, because his big weakness is pollution, like a plant. And I mean, what happens whenever metal and that kind of thing starts breaking apart? It tends to leak pollutants.
You're still thinking about this in the same way that Ultron is going to, which is, if I can destroy Swamp Thing's body, then I win. That is definitively not the case.
I think Ultron is thinking, if I destroy all plant life on the planet, I win, and I think he could do that without a hell of a lot of hassle on his part.
I mean, I think it would take him a little while to destroy all the plant life on the planet, especially when it's all fighting against him.
I think it might take a little while, but I think it's also going to take Swamp Thing a little while to be like, what does it mean that I'm a plant?
Very nice, Team Ultron. Team Swamp Thing, would you like to deliver some rebuttals?
Yay!
Oh, come on. Don't leave me in suspense.
God.
Yay!
Claire, you're such a nut.
I know you can do it. I'm really rooting for you.
Claire, haven't you chlorophylled this podcast enough with puns?
Oh!
Yay!
Claire, that was some really low-hanging fruit right there. I just want to let you know.
Hub, you brought up the interesting idea that, like, Ultron could plant-proof himself or some of his bodies, and I guess that's maybe a thing, but, like, Ultron is obsessed with improving himself, but he's really slow when it comes to improving, like, all of his robotic minions. Like, there's that one West Coast Avengers storyline that starts off with Iron Man fighting a bunch of Ultron's minions, finds out that their weak point is in their shoulders, and then, like, several issues later, after Ultron has made a bunch more, they still have that exact same weakness that Iron Man exploited in their first encounter with each other. So yeah, Ultron may be, like, pimping out his own ride. I don't think his soldiers are going to be nearly as impressive as he is.
Well, a lot of these fallacies that Ultron is coming up, his clogged thinking, is due to, much like Dominic Toretto, his weakness is family. If you get a Vision or a Hank Pym up in the mix, yeah, his thinking goes a little wonky. But on the DC Universe, ain't no Pyms, ain't no Visions.
I don't know whether or not this is worth arguing or not, but I just don't want the judge to get the idea, Hub, that anything resembling your characterization of Swamp Thing is the actual Swamp Thing. Like, you seem to think he's this slow, mopey, depressed dude who's all sad because he wants to be human. First of all, he, as mentioned, moves via the green, and he also, moves basically, as they call it, via his astral form, which we know from issue number 79, that happens at the speed of light. He acts numerous times without outside encouragement. Most notably, it involves going to save Abby from Gotham City, or in one case, hell, but he does certainly act quickly and act definitively. And as far as, like, he doesn't need the Parliament of Trees to tell him what to do. They're usually an obstacle in his way because they're being a dickhole to him. As far as wanting to be human again and having that limitation, dude, he got over that in, like, the first few issues of Moore's Run, back when the numbering of the comic was in the 20s, as opposed to Ultron, who has never-ending daddy issues that he will not let go.
Yeah, but his daddy's not there.
About Swamp Thing, I just want to say, he threw his brain into space so he could masturbate on a blue planet. Like,
which team are you arguing for, Megan?
You're gonna make me write that sentence in my notes.
I think we can definitively state that Bob is the horny one in this episode.
Only because Alec Holland isn't here.
He throws his brain into space so he can...
avoid dying.
To avoid dying. And he's on a blue planet and he makes a world, but everything is populated by him. He is the power providing it life, and he makes a vision of the woman that he loves, and he is her consciousness. Like, she's not independent of him, but he's still like, but I'm still gonna fuck it.
Okay, that's all fair. I mean, I don't think he would be doing that were Earth under attack by a robot army. I'm gonna go ahead and say that.
I'm just saying there's a kind of guy who does that, or a kind of person who does that, and I am that person, but Swamp Thing is also that person.
Hub, you came up with the idea of Ultron being able to use, like, kryptonite and promethium, but one common element of Ultron's stories is that, like, he's never strong or smart enough to bring about some new, evil, innovative plan to fruition by himself. He always has to, like, hijack a shield helicarrier, or steal an exotic metal, or assemble a doomsday device. Like, when he makes a body of adamantium for himself for the first time, he can't figure out how to make adamantium or how it works, so he instead decides to kidnap the person who discovered adamantium in the first place. He can't do this stuff by himself, and needing to reach out and go about these plans...
So his weakness is innovative problem solving?
He just leaves himself open to being betrayed, or, like, second guessed, or having, an organic being helping him with promethium that then Swamp Thing can spy through his gut bacteria. These are all just, like, open doors that he's leaving into his plans.
Okay, but... you said that the Monitor looked away for the first time when he saw Swamp Thing fighting Arcane.
He was considering it.
I think that's because he just didn't want to look at Swamp Thing's weird face vagina. What is it with fucking swamp creatures having weird genitals for noses? Man-Thing's got a dick on his nose. Swamp Thing's got a vagina on his nose. Oh, what if those two got together?
I would actually accept that argument if it weren't for the fact that this is not the first time we've seen Monitor watching Swamp Thing. And he hasn't turned away in disgust because of the vagina nose before.
Are we now going to also have fan fiction about Swamp Thing's face having sex with Man-Thing's face?
I'm just saying, are they kissing? Are they fucking? Who can tell?
Wait, I'm gonna go look it up. I'll be right back.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Report back to us with your findings.
Well, after this battle, the comics version of the DC Universe is starting to look a lot like the film version of the DC Universe, which is to say, mostly gray rubble. After 3 months of extended battles between armies of Ultron Juniors and little swamplings, a substantial portion of the world's plants have been converted into swamp things, which have been destroyed by Ultrons, and a similarly sized percentage of the planet's mineral resources have become Ultrons, which have been destroyed by swamp things. If something doesn't happen soon to change this battle's trajectory, there isn't going to be a planet left to rule with an adamantium fist and or save with a green one. Fortunately for everyone, though, something does indeed happen. A little something called the lightning round.
Oh!
If you're paying close attention, I gave you all the clues, Mr. Policeman, about what was going to happen. Just so you know. Because you see, whenever someone tricks the cosmic prankster, Mr. Mixaspitlick, into saying his own name backwards, he gets banished back to the 5th dimension for 90 days. But after 3 months of banishment, now with no other heroes left to oppose him, he is free to wreak havoc upon the Earth once more. However, to be frank, he's a little peeved about how Swamp Thing and Ultron have been mucking up the place in his absence. Mixie's a trickster, surely, but he's not a monster, and he can't torment the people of Earth with his insufferable bullshit if there isn't an Earth left. This 5-dimensional imp appears before our contestants and tells Swamp Thing and Ultron that he intends to teach them a lesson, and he uses his reality-warping powers to sentence them to the most miserable prison imaginable. A call center. Swamp Thing and Ultron are now neither fighting crimes nor causing them, but find themselves living thoroughly mundane lives in a thoroughly mundane version of Earth. They live in tiny apartments on the edge of town and commute each day in their rusty, beat-up cars to a little office complex in the middle of the city. Yes, they still have their powers, and they could try to rebel against this scenario, but as powerful as both of them are, Mixaspitlick is even stronger, and the only way to escape this terrible reality is to play his game. Swamp Thing is working the phones, taking incoming calls, helping people with tech support. Between having to follow a script that makes no sense, being evaluated on metrics that are impossible to understand, and trying to screen share with people whose computers sometimes aren't even turned on, this is going to be one hell of a challenge for Mr. Holland. Ultron's job, however, is no better, because he's been assigned as the office complex's groundskeeper. He has to ensure the safety and well-being of every tree and patch of grass on the medians of the parking lot, and to water and care for all of the potted plants throughout the building's interior. And right now, the city is experiencing an unprecedented heat wave. The first of you to impress your boss, Mr. Mixie, and get a promotion will be allowed to leave this pocket dimension and return to your normal life. The other one of you will be stuck in this hell world forever, or at least until Mixie gets bored and decides to do something else. Advocates, how do you excel at your job, despite the fact that it's not exactly in your normal wheelhouse? How do you charm your coworkers and impress your superiors to become the most popular person in the office? And perhaps most importantly, since you two do still hate each other, how do you prank each other and potentially sabotage each other's attempts to do your respective jobs well? I remind you that you do still technically have your powers, but Mixaspitlick has told you that you're not allowed to use them, so if he catches you doing so, you're probably not going to win this thing. So if and when you do use your powers, be sure to be subtle. Also, bonus points if you can come up with a way to get Mr. Mixaspitlick to say his name backwards. Team Ultron went first in the main round, so Team Swamp Thing will be going first in the lightning round. Team Swamp Thing, feed me that sweet, sweet psychedelic yam that is your answer to this lightning round.
Well, it's funny you should mention that.
Surprisingly, most of our solutions were psychedelic yam based.
Carry on.
You know, you talked about becoming friends with coworkers, which is a really important part of this challenge. And in addition to the fact that Swamp Thing is just like a really nice guy, as opposed to Ultron, who's a fucking asshole, I feel like Swamp Thing is gonna get most of his coworkers on his side as soon as they figure out that he's the best drug hookup in the office.
Oh, jeez.
Like, this isn't using his powers. Those things just grow on him. And we know from the Swamp Thing comics that when people start selling those to drug users, there's a market for it and they come back.
Meanwhile, like, Ultron's over here with his brown thumbs just killing every single plant in the place, whether he means to or not, which he definitely does not mean to, given that his job depends on it.
That's what happens when you got your thumb stuck up your gigantic asshole that you also are.
Salient point, Miles, thank you.
In terms of doing his job, I think, you might think that Swamp Thing has like a disadvantage in a call center because of how slowly he talks. But here's the thing. You know what makes up for that? The fact that as he's talking on the phone with customers, tiny little roots at their house are like working their way through the walls and like reconnecting all their shit just automatically. And if anything more complicated is going on, he can see through microscopic plant particles and he can just like instantly diagnose the problem. I don't think either of those things are noticeable enough that Mr. Mixaspitlick is going to pick up on them.
He's just going to be like, oh yeah, you need a new router. And also, how often do you water your ficus? Because you might want to re-examine your watering schedule.
In terms of practical jokes, we're going subtle use of powers here. Swamp Thing has some conversations with the plants that Ultron is meant to be looking after, and like everybody goes home for the night, and then when the first people come into the office the next morning, the plants are just like in weird different places, and everybody's like, "What the fuck? Who is the gardener? Why is this one in the sink? Like, what are you doing? You're in charge of these. You can't even keep track of them. They're plants. They don't move."
And then obviously the real prize of this whole lightning round, getting Mr. Mixaspitlick to say his name backwards. Mixie comes into his office one day and he walks over to his desk, sits down at the computer, and then sees that there's like a massive clump of dandelion fluff sitting on the K on his keyboard. And so he like brushes the fluff aside and accidentally hits the K as he does so. And then he looks back down and there's another one right on the L. He's like, what is going on? He brushes that one aside too. And you can see where this is going. Before too long, he has inadvertently typed Celtic Zixum, which I think is how you pronounce his name backwards. So there you go. That's how they get rid of him.
Team Swamp Thing, very well done. Team Ultron, really? Right in front of my non-salad?
So, at first, Ultron's pretty upset with this situation, but he decides to buckle down and he focuses on the job at hand first. And so he turns into like a real Edward 5000 scissors hands and starts making some really elaborate topiaries. And he gets kind of into it. And he also starts using his electronic powers to like really fine-tune the sprinkler systems and like taps into the internet and finds out all the best plant care techniques. And at first, he's got this plan in the back of his mind. He knows he's Swamp Thing's rival in this, but he could maybe form a temporary alliance with him and then betray him for sure. Definitely betray him. But, if his job is to grow things and there's a Swamp Thing right there, it wouldn't hurt to get on his good side. So he starts working on that. And Swamp Thing notices how hard Ultron's working on his gardening skills.
Oh my god.
What?
Megan Bob, do you want to take over from here?
I do. Ultron, he doesn't need to sleep. So he comes in very, very early in the morning to mist all the plants and to make sure that they get exactly what they need. So he's calmly walking around, spraying them and sort of humming to himself. And Swamp Thing also wakes up very early, just because it's nice to have some alone time. He doesn't like to be crowded on the commute. And then Swamp Thing sees Ultron in this early dawn light misting a plant. And in the glow of the break room coffee machine, Ultron sort of sees Swamp Thing for the first time as not an enemy, but as somebody trapped in this same place with him, somebody who understands what it's like to have your powers tied behind your back, as it were. He leans in and he kisses him. And then they fuck on the break room coffee table.
And Mixaspitlick likes to watch. That's kind of his whole thing. And so, like, initially, the whole topiary thing was he was going to spell out the words Mixaspitlick backwards out of, like, these elaborate topiaries. But nobody really wants to go home anymore. Ultron's feeling fulfilled for, like, the first time. He's got a solid relationship with a good person. He has the human life that he's always coveted. Mixaspitlick gets to watch a plant fuck a robot. Everybody wins.
And I want to say, I know I made it sound like the sex was like super hardcore. It wasn't. It was very tender and like soft and very much out of place in this break room. They didn't break anything.
Except for the boundaries that had been between them.
Yeah! Oh, This is the best.
I feel like Bob and Hub were just like, I reject your lightning round objectives and substitute them with my own.
Pretty much.
I mean, sure, they would have won one prize if they were able to send Mixtapitalik back to the fifth dimension, but, I mean, the real prize was the love that they found along the way.
Yeah.
And isn't that the greatest prank of all?
I mean, is it a prank?
I personally feel pretty pranked at this point, so yeah, I guess you're right.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right. Well, you guys have given me a lot to think about.
I'm sure.
I thought it was going to be who's going to win this match, but I think now it's just going to be trying to come up with a good ship name for Swamp Thing and Ultron. So I'll let you know what I come up with in regards to that, and possibly the winner of this match as well, in just a few minutes.
Oh man, there's only like so few Swamp Thing things out there. This is really sad. I'm trying to find more.
Who is he paired with?
Okay. I don't even know if there's any that are pairings. Let me see.
So wait, it's just him on the blue planet masturbating? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so you can't control it that finely. There are some fine controls, but it's also like, if I'm just looking for the character, it'll spit back every fic that has that character in it. Like, the first result is a My Hero Academia crossover with the DCU and Planetary.
No.
And I'm like, well, clicking away from that. And then over here now is, I don't like this. The first two characters are Perfuma from She-Ra and Swamp Thing. I don't care for this. Oh, okay. So there's something in the water, and it's a Swamp Thing /you fic.
Wait, so like it's written in the second person?
Yes.
Like a choose your own adventure?
Yes. The tags are Swamp Thing doesn't have a dick, viciously making out underwater somehow. You are called Cricket several times, so click away if you don't want to be called a cricket.
Wow.
That seems like a trap. If you're clicking away, I think you do want to be called a cricket.
I can't believe I wrote this. I wrote this instead of sleeping. I am a mess. Also, whoops, you are a monster fucker.
Yep. There's that Hugo Award going to work.
How dare you? I have written some great shit.
By the way, Bob, congratulations on being a Hugo winner.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice work.
Can we introduce you on the show now as Hugo Award-winning Megan Bob?
I think we definitely should start doing that.
Please. Also, I want to say, if anybody out there, if this gets left in for some goddamn reason, if you go out there and you read this fic, this Swamp Thing fucking fic, you have to leave a nice comment and thank the person for writing this thing that you're enjoying. You can't be a douche. That's not cool. So, if you read it, go say, thank you for the porn, friend, and then continue with your life.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you for the porn and congratulations for the Hugo
That's right.
Award. That's what you say.
Yes.
What's Ultron looking like?
There's not as many as you might think. There are 15 that are Ultron /you, or the way AO3 has it is Ultron Reader. And then
so this is like a whole. I'm sorry. I'm like very much an outsider when it comes to fanfic. There's like a whole considerably sized subset of second person fanfic.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I don't want to say considerably sized, and I definitely would say that it is almost exclusively one-shot porn stories. It's not usually extended explorations of the character or a relationship, because that's quite hard to maintain from a second person
Yes,
perspective.
you would imagine.
So it's like, this is how you get banged, and you're like, great.
I feel like it's a huge part of fanfic. That's probably because most of the fanfic I've gone looking for has been one-shot porn stories.
right.
So
Well, I mean,
maybe my
me
perspective
too,
is
but,
skewing
like,
You're just
things.
trying to get that. You're just trying to get that gold medal now. You've just made
It's
it a goal.
mine!
Well, guys, I have some good news. I got the ship name down.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Oh.
How do we feel about Robocrop?
That's very good.
Yep. Strong yes.
I approve.
Very good.
I approve very much.
All
I
right,
love
good.
that I have managed to infect this show.
I think you just kind of brought it out into the open. We were like all afraid to talk about it, but now that
guys.
you're
All right, well, then I'm happy to have been any level of catalyst at all.
So, yeah, I have a few catchphrases on this show. One of my slightly less well-known ones that I still feel the need to bust out pretty much every time I do a judge segment is path to victory. Yes, you get points for talking about how powerful you are and the impressive things you've done in the past. What wins matches when I'm judging is a clear explanation of how you will leverage your powers to win the match. And both sides talked a lot about how they would destroy each other's physical bodies. And yeah, that's great, but you just have so many of those. For a while, I was really persuaded by the whole Ultron seduces Swamp Thing and then stabs him thing. I was like, okay, but that's one body. So
Exactly.
I think that the team that did a lot of a better job laying out a clear path to victory is definitely Team Ultron. They talked about the whole burning, all the plants and destroying plant life at a fundamental level. And Swamp Thing wasn't really talking about that. Team Swamp Thing is just talking more about destroying individual Ultron bodies. That being said, if you can convince me that you're sufficiently stronger in a lot of other ways, that might also be enough to overcome not presenting as clear of a path to victory. I'm very persuaded by the fact that the idea that Swamp Thing can build his body so much faster than Ultron, and even though you didn't come up with a clear path to victory, you mentioned the idea that Swamp Thing can grow a bigger brain to get smarter, to get better at solving problems. And then I just saw this note, which is basically, as you said, no one's beaten Swamp Thing, and a lot of people have beaten Ultron. So even though I really thought you had a nice clear path to victory with Ultron, even though I would ordinarily rule that way, I don't think it's enough. I still think Ultron can be undone and has been undone, even when he has seemingly great plans at the beginning. So I have to give this one to Team Swamp Thing.
Oh man, you guys really made us work for that one.
Jeez.
I got the romance I wanted, so I feel emotionally satisfied.
Yeah, we're definitely all the winners here after that little story you guys wove of love on a break room table.
Hub, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was super fun. I circled this date on my calendar, and I also knew I was quitting my job relatively soon, and so I actually put my last day a week before this.
Oh, man.
So that I would have time to do all the reading and shit.
Hi, Hub.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey. Hi, audience. Guess what time it is? Time for the kit, thanks. First of all, congratulations to my second favorite Kingdom of Life for winning this match.
All right. Take that, protists.
Wait. What's your first favorite kit?
Aminals.
Oh, okay.
Come on.
That's fair.
Over to Twitter. Thank you to Jeff Rick Present, Cosplay Devotee, Cosplay Fiend, Cool Down Now, Sean Boyd, Sid Rabbit Blog. Jeff Rick Present, you got on here twice, you sneaky bastard. Changing Shades, CJ, Icon Jade, Florian, Robert Ramsey, Sandwich Surplus, Ant Bluff 96.
Ant Bluff 96.
Ant Bluff 96.
Cynical Realist, JTFJ2, the Jakening, and 3 owls in a short skirt and a long jacket. Also, thank you to Jackson Bruheim for drawing us such a lovely pic of Jesse from Team Rocket as Galactus's Herald.
Yep.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, that
it's
was
so
amazing.
We have a very stupid show, everyone. I'm sorry to break it to you.
Over to Tumbles. Thank you to Changing Shades, Sid Rabbit Blog, and Fabulous69. And on Facebook, thank you to Adam Mail, Robert Ramsey, Jeffrey Ketchum, and Jeff Polier.
And thanks to our especially super patrons this week, Jennifer Jordan, a.k.a. Green Matchbook? Green Matchstick?
Green Matchbook.
Green Matchbook.
Also, a.k.a. secretly an Ultron robot.
Yes, also secretly an Ultron. And also, thanks to Sydney Green, a.k.a. Florida, the 2 new shining stars in the DCU, turned into such, they got their amazing metahuman powers via patreon.com/smashfictionpodcast, as all of our patrons do at some time or another, along with all the other stuff that we have on that site. I have a new Extraordinary League story that just dropped. I believe there's some artwork that's going to be coming out this month. It's all a good time. And thanks also, of course, to Hub. Hub, you are a shining star in our firmament. We're always happy to have you on the show. And we would love it if you could tell our listeners all about what you do and where they can find your work.
Oh, I do a show called Titan Up the Defense. That's Titan. It's a show where I write a synopsis of either a Teen Titans or Defenders comic book, and then my brother comes over and has some drinks and we talk about it. It's a good time, I think. We also have a Patreon, and if you donate to that, then you get access to a bunch of bonus material. I think Corey and I are doing another drug awareness episode. Started to say prevention, but not really the way we do it.
Hey, have you heard of drugs?
It's just important to create drug awareness in the area.
That's right.
Also, if you are a patron to patreon.com/ttwasteland, then you get access to a monthly podcast that I co-host with my wife, Lisa, called What the Duck, a podcast most foul, but with a W, because he's a duck. That's the full name of the show. That's a show that we do about Howard the Duck.
Yeah, I want to say for any of the listeners of Smash Fiction who go, I don't know, that seems complicated, all these characters, or I'm not really a comic book person. Okay. You've met me. I am the least knowing of a thing that is comic book related. And I listen to it, and it's so delightful and so charming and so enjoyable and fun to listen to and easy to just let it wash over you like a delicious alcoholic beverage.
You know, like how you pour delicious alcoholic beverages over you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you shower, Dave.
All right, Miss Moneybags.
But it's wonderful. And even if you're going, I don't know, I think you should try it because I think you're going to really love how weird the 60s were.
Oh, they're so weird.
They're so weird.
And I got to say, I've been listening to the NXT Wrestling Fan.
Aww.
That shit's great.
Yeah, it is.
And thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate that. The second episode has come out very recently as this is released. So hope you like that, and thanks for the shout out, man.
Yeah.
I was delighted to listen to it.
That was the most circle jerky thing I think we've ever recorded of the show.
Did we make a full circle in the jerking?
I think we might have, yeah.
Look, it feels good and it doesn't hurt anyone.
Hold on, because Claire, you put over Hub, right?
Well, no, I said something about Bob. I don't think anyone said anything about me, so I feel a little...
Well, hold on. No. Hold on, let me change that. You put over Bob put over Hub put over us, so now I will say, and also, you should definitely, also, if you don't listen to the Next Wrestling Fan, you should look at the logo, because it's beautiful, and it was designed by Claire Mulcairn, so there we go.
Claire's art so good.
Hooray. A perfect circle jerk Mobius strip.
I'm just here to watch, apparently.
We all love Dan and Kit very much and would jerk them off if they wanted to be jerked off about something.
If they requested jerking off, we would oblige them.
I'm good.
All right, we know who's not the horny ones. I'm just saying. Thank you so very much for listening to this episode of Smash Fiction. Next week, it's time for Collaboratory.
Smash Fiction is produced by Dan Mulcairn, with logo design by Claire Mulcairn.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod at Incompetech.com for our theme song, Hitman.
You can find us on Twitter at SmashFic Podcast and search for the Smash Fiction Podcast on Facebook, Tumblr, and YouTube.
Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice, and if you leave us a good review, we shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Smash Fiction is made possible thanks to our supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/smashfictionpodcast. Please consider donating as little as $1 each month. It helps us keep the show going, and we have great rewards and extra content for those who help us out.
If you have any suggestions, feedback, or other contributions, send them to us at smashfictionpodcast@gmail.com and help us continue the fight.
And for the record, were you guys aware that the 1991 Swamp Thing cartoon, rather than having an original theme song, just played a cover of the song Wild Thing during its opening credits, but changed the lyrics so that they were singing about Swamp Thing?
Is that
awesome.
true?
Yeah,
I
it
need
is
to watch
true,
that.
and it's awesome. And actually, as a kid, that was my first encounter with that song, and I did not know that it was a cover. I just thought that was an original song about Swamp Thing. And
That's
when I first heard the song
incredible.
Wild Thing, I was very confused.
I had a similar experience with the reruns of Punky Brewster. They were advertised with the song Won't You Take Me to Punky Town? And I thought that Lips Incorporated's magnum opus was in fact about Punky Brewster, which it was not.
Boy, your face must have been red on karaoke night.
Yeah. Damn it, I had a phrase I really wanted to use.
Oh, shit. Oh, that's right. It was good. Do you want to just say it so everybody gets to hear it because it's good?
Yes.
Do it.
Do it.
I don't know how I was going to end it, but sure, Hank Pym is a perennial contender for the Ben Carson Award for the world's dumbest genius.
I I didn't even get to talk about Swamp Thing being the planetary elemental.
Yeah.
know?
I didn't get to talk about Ultron fucking holding his consciousness together through radio waves and bad intentions through the void of space.
I didn't talk about the time
Yeah.
that Daredevil beat Ultron with a stick, so...